We are ready. Take it away, Rebecca.
Okay, well, thank you, Desiree, so much. I am happy to introduce today's topic for the NDLC. But before I get started with that, I wanted to do a real brief introduction of this fabulous women on the call, Desiree, who started the NDLC long before I got here, but I'm proud to be sort of a co-developer in this group. But rather than me introduce, I would love for these talented professional women to go ahead and do a real brief introduction, and then I will do an introduction before I introduce our topic for today. So Desiree, why don't we start with you?
Very cool. So I'm Desiree Patno. I founded the group back in 2009. This is the NDILC, and what we do is I am a real estate facilitator between the unhoused or the homelessness, all the way to family offices, everything in between with a gender lens from R&D and making sure that we have a seat at the table to get things done. So thank you very much. And I'll pass it over to Erica.
Good morning. I'm Erica Courtney. A lot of experience with the international, the federal and state level policy planning, et cetera. Heavy military background, also a small business owner since 2008. And an advocate for women and for women veterans.
Awesome. Thank you, Erica. Teresa.
And I'm Teresa Palacio Smith, and I'm Chief Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Officer for Home Services of America and Berkshire Hathaway Home Services, as well as Real Living Real Estate. And I've been part of this group for about 5 years now. It might be a bit longer. Absolutely love it. And I get so much from it because of all the content that we do in these types of events, as well as in conferences. And we're talking about the one that we're going to be doing someplace, sometime soon, right? But definitely, I'm also a women advocate, and also in minority home ownership, an advocate for that. And I have a series called Women Who Lead for anyone that's interested in that podcast as well. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Teresa. And Tammy.
I'm Tammy Bonnell. I'm the co-chair for Exit Realty Corps International, and I've been a strong advocate for women and children probably the second I started working. And I love this strong group of women because we're really actually physically making a difference instead of just sitting on the sidelines. So it's great to be here.
Great. Thank you so much. And just talking about women and women leadership, there's still a long way to go. I think if I look over the last 20 years, we have made such great strides, but there's so much more that's left on the table, so much more, whether it's Black and Brown women leaders or whether it's just women leaders in general, board seats. I mean, sort of it runs the gambit of women. The principles that we have pulled together as an organization are really tough. They're tough to live by, they're tough to embrace, they're tough to develop. But I think that these principles will certainly carry us into further development and into a principled approach to women strong leaders. Today's topic is know yourself. And I just find that know yourself is probably one of the more difficult ones for me, because it's always evolving. Know yourself, and let me just read here for a second about this principle specifically. Be authentic and lead in a way that is true to you. Own your unique talents and strengths and empower those around you. So know yourself sounds really simple, right? It's about self-awareness, it's about transparency, it's about being ethical. But what I have found over my career is that gets tough. That gets tough. So you're parachuted into a new company, a new business, the start of your career, or something very, very challenging. And all around you, there's culture. There's culture that influences what you are in that new position. And what I have found is sometimes it's hard to really dig through the culture that stands, the buzzwords, sort of the fads that may be present, because not all leaders are self-aware. So some of the things I want to talk about today with this, with you guys are really around, uncovering blind spots. How do you become self-aware? How do you handle adversity. There are really three things that I think is principles around being authentic. One is just demonstrate behaviors that enable you to be trusted. So how is that? What behaviors do you demonstrate so people come to you, not run away from you, and come to you in an authentic manner? The second one for me is just take ownership. If there's a mistake made, raise your hand. If you are the owner, you cannot blame others. Under your watch, it's really important. And that gets to nurturing, I think. And as women, we do have a tendency to be good nurturers, but sometimes we want to tamp that down in the corporate workplace, which is problematic when you go back to being authentic. So the second one is there a place where you made a mistake and you had to take ownership, or one of your teammates or one of your employees or associates made a mistake, and how you handle those? The third one is really show courage. Courage is so hard because it's about addressing head on something that's not working right, something that needs to change, something that may be seeded into the culture of your company that you're going to challenge. And I find it really, really scary. I remember early on in my career, I saw all these things that were like, I don't believe in that. I believe in this. And how do I really communicate those and get the courage to make a statement, make a change, lead by example? And sometimes it's not just about saying something, it's about doing something. So I want to start, Erica, let me start with you. And I'm sure this has a different flavor potentially with your background and experience, but why don't we talk about sort of, how do you take ownership when a mistake is made? And what do you do about that? And then also we'll get to the courage secondly, but let's start with how do you show leadership by example with mistakes?
Yeah, I mean, we all make mistakes. We make mistakes every day. I mean, the older we get, hopefully the less we make. But I think this goes back to what you were talking about, being authentic. We don't know the answers for everything, clearly. And when you're in a position of leadership and influence, it's pretty obvious when you may have made the wrong call. So, you have to be humble and you need to own that, and you need to make sure that you acknowledge that. But, hopefully you're gathering input before such a big decision needs to be made. So you're taking a lot of things into consideration to get past your own bias, your experience that you may have that could be limited. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing worse than a leadership, someone in that position who can't reflect and say, that situation blew up out of control, but what was my part in that? How could I have influenced that or changed the outcome? Because, there's that old saying, it's like, God gave you 5 fingers, right? And generally, yeah, I don't remember what it is, but you guys can
Pointing.
interject, right? It points back at you. So that's the approach that I take, making sure that I learn from that. And then hopefully the mistakes that I made, especially in my line of business, aren't life-threatening. So that comes with training and experience and collaboration.
Yeah, no, that's great. Anybody else? Teresa, Tammy, Desiree, want to jump in here? Tammy.
Well, I think when you make a mistake, and obviously we're all human and we make them, I think that we're a human becoming our entire life, unless we're living on the sidelines, right? So we're constantly coming into our own. And thankfully, as we get a little bit older, we become a lot more into our own. But I find that the best way for me to own a mistake is to use it as a teaching moment, not just what can I do about it now so that it doesn't happen again in the future. And, what can I do about it right now and to fix as much as possible, but what can I do about it in the future so it doesn't happen again? But using that as a teaching moment to help others, not only does that create the trust that you mentioned, Rebecca, of, having somebody see that you're human and that you make errors, but really utilizing it as a teaching moment for others so that they can see that it's okay to be human. It's okay to make mistakes. Just admit it as quick as possible, utilize it as a teaching moment, and then move on.
But do you think that, Teresa, I would love to get your opinion on this one too. Do you think that making mistakes, especially early on in a woman's career, in your career, my career, shows weakness?
Well, I don't think so. I mean, I think for everyone makes mistakes. It's how culpable you are about and how you own it. You have to actually own it. And I can give you a real true exact example of something that happened to me. And it's a small thing, but it was a huge thing in general, in light of other things that people encounter. But I think this is very relatable. So when I was a real estate agent, I worked in the relocation department, and third-party companies will call in with referrals and opportunities that they have. And we worked with a third-party company that, called in a referral. By the time they called me, it was like on a Friday, okay? Friday evening, almost 5 o'clock, and said, Teresa, you need to call this referral over the weekend. They need to be placed. And I was not the agent, I was the person placing the referral, right? He's real important, blah, blah, blah. That was it. So Friday evening, I get home. Saturday, guess what? Saturday happens, life happens, you're working, right? You're doing stuff at home. Completely forgot to call the guy. Sunday, I call him. It's now 1 o'clock or 5 o'clock when I finally figured out that I'd forgotten to call the guy. And so I called him and I said, I'm so sorry. I apologize. The weekend got away from me, but I wanted to reach out to you. And he goes, forget it. I've already chosen another company. I waited for your call since last week. Okay. So in other words, the third-party company had held the call and only called me on Friday night. Okay. And they had known about the call on like the weekend before. Okay. He goes, I've been waiting and I haven't heard from anybody. So I've just gone with your competitor and I'm going to be working with them. And I found out he was the CEO of the company. It was a pretty big account in Atlanta. My whole disposition. And he goes, I'm just firing this third party. I mean, the third party company was going to be fired too. And I said, first of all, I don't want you to fire anyone. This is totally my fault. I should have called you immediately on Friday night. I apologize again. I didn't want them to affect their account. I could have said this happened, but I said, I apologize. Please forgive me. And, this is a teaching moment for me. And I really hope you the very best of luck with your realtor. They're a great company. If something happens, let me know. And we certainly would be happy to work with your business. The next day I went in the office, freaked out, thinking, oh my God, call the third party company, let them know what had happened, called our CEO, let him know what happened, and our reload team. And I said, what I want to do is send him a nice meal, because obviously he waited around weekend. So I sent him a card for the Atlanta, so a group of, and a note apologizing again and letting him know that I really was sorry. He called me the next day and he said, Teresa, I have used this in all my sales teams to show this as how you handle a situation that went bad. Because
Yes.
the whole time I was freaked out thinking that and he goes, we will not be, he goes, I couldn't believe how you handle it. And let me tell you, I didn't know what else to do, but I didn't want to throw a third party company under the bus. And I knew that I failed. It was my fault, regardless, if I'd called him Friday night, it would have been fine, right? It would have been fine. So anyway, that was my teaching moment. And mistakes happen. It's how you handle those mistakes, how you take ownership of them, and how you move forward that I think really helps you get out of those situations.
Oh my gosh, that is such a great example. I love it. I love it. Thank you for sharing that, Teresa. I appreciate that. And I'll just add to this that, I recently, I've had, 25-year career so far and lots of different challenges, but I recently ran into a challenge that was sort of novel. We were trying to put some technology in, we were trying to make change happen in the nonprofit world. Well, that's tough for people, anybody, it's tough to change. But even more so if something hasn't changed for, decades, trying to make that change. So I'm pushing for new technology. And there are some agencies that I'm working with that just aren't ready. and freaking out. And basically, they put together a letter basically saying, hey, Rebecca, this isn't working. I think that you will blame others for this rather than blame yourself. And will you fire your general counsel for the mistake he made? And I was so taken aback by that, because one is, obviously you don't know me. Any mistake that gets done by my team is my mistake. So like you, Teresa, and I'm sure everyone else on this call, I took it upon myself to correct the mistake, to apologize for the mistake. I mean, contrition's a big thing because I think others may not expect it. But no, I was not going to fire my general counsel. I was actually going to use it, like you say, as a teaching moment. And it's really, really important to do that, because it kind of comes back to the first principle, which is, how do you get people to trust you? How do you get them to trust you? In the big banks where I started my career, there's a whole lot of pointing the finger. And that is not a good culture. So let me just put it out there. Any other sort of stories, situations? Desiree, I see you're coming off
Yeah.
mute.
Thank you. So yeah, I could add a few. I think for me, I'll do the other spectrum of what Teresa did on a big scale. My bank lawsuit has been out there now for 8 years now. And I kept it quiet for a year, didn't tell anyone, didn't want anyone to know about it, because when you sit on the resource as small businesses to understand access to capital and everything else, and hear the exposure of what happened to me, I didn't want to feel that, how could I show myself that this is what happened to me and put it out there? So I had to own the mistake. And we're talking about, own what's going on. And so when the story came out, and it took me really a hard time to really be relatable to it, to say, okay, can we do this? And we can pull this together. The more I went into and accepted my own ownership that this happened, and the circumstances around it that showed that I was human, with 2 people that were in hospitals and things that was going down. And it took me 6 years to understand that it took time for me to realize the fight is a bigger cause than just my personal thing that happened to me and affected my life and everything else. And that has now led me into a bigger place that allowed me to show my vulnerability to the authenticity of talking about trust, and people really embraced me. And so for those who don't know, I had 140 unsigned checks, 387 forgeries, and I had to where the banks was funding $20,000 per month into accounts. That own thing became my nemesis of not being able to think properly, go through life. And now I understand how we can emotionally get charged and pull back. So the ownership is when you show people that you are human and that you do make mistakes and things that are, you move on and you learn from them, that you're not just this cover, that there's a lot of things underneath the hood. That trust moment that you're talking about has shown so much more that has happened in my life, and it has allowed me to go places that I never thought I could go. So for that being said, it's really helped me out. So I'd love to that environment, which brings down to the authenticity that you were talking about, the She Centerfold, talking about things that if you expose your pain, your troubles, your issues that you've had in your journey in your life, people will see that your vulnerability is there. They'll open up more, because that fear factor of not being on that, hey, I have something on you, you have something on me kind of scenario. So I love your 3 comments. I think they're fantastic.
Yep. Thank you, Desiree. Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, I have too many mistakes to actually count. and one of the things that I appreciate about those mistakes, I'd love to hear a little bit more from the team here, but mistakes have been my number one way of learning. From early on in my career, where if I didn't get something right, I would be pretty aggressive. I'm like, well, that doesn't work. And that self-awareness, I find, even going up in the management chain, like some people I feel like are naturally self-aware and others have to work at it. I love people's opinion around that, because I find that it really gets in the way of people not only being authentic, of course, but progressing in their career. So I'd love to hear others comment on that authenticity.
I'll jump in real quick on that. Killing someone with kindness, like Teresa, you know, apologizing. It's not them. It's me. You know, even though it was a multitude of things that happened, and then spending money and time and effort to actually send something forward, just shows that, you know, that is really owning and taking it to the next level. I think that, you know, we all have to. I think the storytelling is what's so powerful right now, is that we have to keep coming up with not the good, oh, look at me, this is so great, and always showing the best light. We have to show the struggles and really highlight it. I mean, everyone on this call, go look at Rebecca. She's centerfold in the magazine. It'll tell us a story of what she's gone through. I mean, the woman is unbelievable. You have no idea, all the ladies, of what they've done on this call. But the idea is that our mistakes not only defined us, but define the character, who we are, that when things get tough, the tough get going. I mean, that whole scenario. And I really believe that our mistakes are better of us than of our successes, because the idea is it shows how strong we are, because the world's not getting easier. It's getting more complex and more complex. And that being strength, I think really shows from a macro level, as Tommy always talked about, the 50,000 foot level versus then boots on the ground. I think is really where this needs to go, is how do we tap from the top, show other people that we can do this from any economic level.
Oh, absolutely. So as women, how do we step into our mistake? What's the first thing we like? So we've all done it and we've all sort of admitted it. Now, how do we show others how to do that and give them the confidence to do that?
I think it's definitely by example. I think you have to show that example to begin with. And then that becomes, well, she did it and she owned up to it. Therefore, I really need to do that too. I'm going to share y'all another real quick story about example. So, when my son was playing football, they were after an event at the football field, we all went to a restaurant, and the kids, the boys, the guys that were on the football team, and they were all guys at the time, it was a pool hall kind of thing. And they took the white stuff, that I don't play pool, but whatever that is, they split it all over the place and they did all this stuff and they messed the pool hall, that the coach got a call from the pool hall or the place we'd all gone to after, stating they had damage, that they'd cause havoc and damage. And, as a football team, the coach wanted to find out who had done this, and to own up to it. So he had called all the boys after, and we were there because we had to pick up the kids, and said, we need to know who did this. Of course, nobody was owning up to it, right? That they had done this. It was all of them. But again, I had not seen it, but I didn't know what had happened. And I'll never forget this prideful moment in my heart when he said, for those of you who, I'm going to give you one last chance, you're going to run miles. You know how they do all that stuff, run 1,000,000 miles, blah, blah, blah. And he said, I want you to step forward, and I'm going to or step back if you weren't involved, like step forward or step back. And Jeffrey stepped forward. It was like 1, 2, 3. My son stepped forward, and I went, oh my God, he did that. Oh, I'm freaking out. And he said, because I know Jeffrey was the only one, he goes, I knew that he would step forward and that no one else would. And I want you guys to own up to it. Who else is? And so Jeffrey, he just said, hey, I did it. I'm not going to lie. So he stepped forward, and he didn't have to run. Everyone else had to run because they all did it, but it was a really prideful moment because it was scary. I mean, the coach is a scary guy, right? And he did. So I think by leading by example, even in that little moment, which, I mean, there were 100 kids that played football, right? For him to step forward and be the only one to take the blame for all of them, I was just so proud, so proud. Anyway.
Yeah, amazing story. Thank you for sharing that. Thank you. So I'll give a little example of one. This happened probably 10 or 15 years ago. But I was managing a team of professionals, of course. And, I try to get to know every person on my team as much as I can. And one of the things that I found about this team in particular was they were really different from me. So they looked at problems differently. They looked at decision-making differently. And I really, really struggled. I struggled with myself. I'm like, well, how can I be myself if I'm so different than all of them? Then I had the opportunity to go through this little, like one day, it was a couple hour session. It was kind of like a Myers-Briggs, but it wasn't. It was the colors. Like, who
Personality.
are you? Yes. And Tammy probably knows this better than me, but I found out a lot about myself, that I'm a linear thinker, that I like to do research, that I'm less of an extrovert than I actually thought I was. But more importantly, I got to understand who they were, how they made decisions. Were they consensus builders? Were they salespeople? Were they other types of thinkers? And to this day, I use that now in building my teams. You want people around you that are different than you. And I think our sense is always, when we first start out, I need to be just like everybody else. And I really learned a lesson and had made some mistakes before that in trying to have a team that was like me versus that accented what I had, and that we had diversified opinions and people and everybody else at the table. And I will tell you, since that day, I think I've become a better leader. And I try to teach that to every young manager, supervisor, team member that I can, because it was such a valuable thing for me. And I'm sure other people, Tammy, you probably have this experience too.
I just wanted to add to that. We do, I'm actually in Atlanta right now. We're teaching 118 new brokers how to, we're a franchise, teaching them the system. And one of the things we do before they come here is we do a personality profile on every single individual. And it not only helps them understand themselves, it helps them understand who they're going to hire as a team, but it also helps us understand, just like we were talking about with mistakes, how I would handle it with that person might be totally different than somebody with a different personality profile. So I know how they're going to react and respond so that I can be proactive and relate to them the way they want to be related to. And they make many less mistakes because they hire people that aren't going to be a duplicate of themselves. Just like you mentioned, they're going to be something else, but it even makes their family stronger. It really does make a huge difference, and it helps you to really understand yourself. One of the things that I think really also helps people, and it is a good thing to understand your own personality profile and how you're going to react, and even how you relate to everybody else. I can't emphasize it enough. We kind of use it as a language here, but whenever you're struggling, and maybe it's just that you're at that next logical level of growth for yourself and you're trying to figure out what you want to do, I find if I ask a handful, and really only a small handful of those people that are closest to you, what words would you use to describe me right now? And if I know if everybody's saying intense, I'm a little too intense right now, and that I need to tone it down, right? That you start to hear how you want to be perceived and how you are perceived sometimes is two different things. And so it'll tell you a lot about whether you're under too much pressure, you need to have a serious conversation and sit down with people. But I find that adding that piece to the mix whenever you're struggling, and usually when you're struggling in some way, shape, or form, it's because you're ready for that next logical level of growth in your own life.
Yeah. Oh, that's terrific. Thank you for sharing that. I have found that is one of the harder things to learn and develop, and it has taken me years to do that. I feel like maybe even the women that I have worked with in the past struggle with it even more. Like, I'm coming into an organization. I want to be a part of that organization. I want to be in the fabric of that organization. That means I have to assimilate to that organization. So can we talk a little bit, maybe Tammy, you could start us out here. Do women have a tendency to try to assimilate into a culture versus being authentic?
I think that they do, because we're more people pleasers as a general rule. And I don't think that's everyone, that we could just draw a hard, fast line, but I do think that we're people pleasers as a general rule. And I find one of the best ways to really help you is, that law of attraction be attracted to a company or an organization, like you getting started on something brand new, be attracted to something that really challenges you, but it aligns with you too, that organization really aligns with you. So you don't have to become something different. Sometimes you know you're on the right path because it feels like everything's in alignment and you don't feel like you have to be something else. And so make sure that it is an organization that fits your core values, that fits really who you are. And, you know, really asking yourself those effective questions so that you're not trying to be something you're not. I do think we're getting a little better over time
Well,
on not feeling so much of a need to do that.
Well, and to your point, Tammy and Rebecca, I think what is also, it depends on the generation that you were, that you were kind of, because if you look at Gen Zs and millennials, I think their perspective is very different. They bring their authentic self because they are able to bring their authentic self for the most part to school. And they actually look at cultures. They actually look at websites prior to confirm that their culture and the culture that they want to be with when they join a company matches what their aspirations are. Do they give? Are they an organization that actually has complaints about having too many male bosses, too many female bosses? All of that, I think it certainly is very different to somebody that maybe was a Gen Y or a baby boomer, right? I think it really does make a difference there. That's what I've seen in the people that I hire and the people that we work with is that, from authenticity, most of the younger people, they walk in, they wear what they want, they, express themselves the way they want to express themselves. And they are authentic in that way. Now, obviously they try to fit into and assimilate into any culture, which I think is really very normal, right? And we talk about assimilation. Hey, I'm a Latina, so we can deal with that one on it all day long, but certainly I think you see that you have to take some assimilation to kind of be part of a culture. I think today more than ever, it's harder because of the fact that a lot of us are now working remotely from home. And so you don't always get to see the real, genuine, true self of a person through Zoom and through remote workspaces. So, I mean, that's what I'm seeing a lot, but that's my perspective. And I didn't mean to jump in. Tammy, I just thought
No.
what you said was so spot on, right?
No,
And then,
Go ahead.
and then on similarity biases, because that's what you were talking about. So I studied similarity biases so long, and I actually am the type of person and always attracted to people that are opposite of me, always have been. My husband is a nuclear physicist, is very different, introverted. So for me, I was built in a way that for me, I want to find people that have my weakness is their strength, so that it kind of fulfills. So I've always hired people that way, right? Obviously we want to hire people that we like on our teams and all that, but I realize that how critical that piece is for me.
Yeah, I think that's terrific. And Erica, let me just pivot to you because, in the military, it is such a different culture and so sort of male centric, I'll call it. So how do women work to find their sea legs, for lack of a better term, in your space? And how do you admit to mistakes and how do you work through those?
Okay, so yes, very male dominated for sure. It's a culture of, when I grew up in the military, it didn't matter if you're male, female, black, white, Hispanic, you're all green, right? You're all one. And differences were absolutely not celebrated or recognized the way that I think corporate America sort of now is saying, hey, diversity of thought, and it helps ROI, and it's amazing. We need those kinds of voices at the table. So over the years, it has slowly shifted to now start really talking about diversity to the point where, a couple months ago, it was a meeting and it was mostly African Americans, and they were talking about, their struggles in the service. And, but it's really hard to still find groups of women that can talk about the differences of being female in a very male dominated space. So we have to adapt when we're young, and we think we have to have those male leadership qualities for people to take us seriously. And my son, a couple of weeks ago, I was on the phone with some of my guys, and he was like, "Mom, whenever you're talking to people from like your unit, your voice gets lower." And I thought, wow, that's such an interesting, thing that he picked up on, because the squeakier high voice, you kind of just, it's just something in me. So I think it's important now for us older gals, when we have the opportunity to work around young women, which I never did in my career, nor did I ever have a woman mentor. There was no one ahead of me. I was it. So now it's important to talk to them straight and say, listen, I was you. I thought there was no difference, but there are differences. And here's how you're going to hopefully handle certain things that come your way, and own your femininity. I'm not saying be pink and flowery and ballerina, right? But own those strengths that sometimes women have, that men don't, and men have strengths sometimes that we don't. It's all about balance. So, I'm generalizing, but just to let them know it's okay to be vulnerable. Quick story, and I think I shared this with some of you guys, but again, I was responsible for implementing female engagement teams for this recent Afghan reintegration at Fort McCoy. And I had a group of young girls, and the younger generation, it's like, oh gosh, they're so sensitive, and oh, we have to treat them with kid gloves. We can't be as just get it done and be as blunt, because then they get sensitive. But it was really important for me to say, hey, you're going to be encountering a lot of women who have just gone through trauma and are really suffering. And you guys are like 18, 19, 20-year-old women. And it might be cool at first, but it's going to weigh on you. You're listening to their stories, you're going to internalize this. And I had a moment when I was driving to my room where I just let it go in my car for 2 minutes, right? Just broke down, lost my, and just was like, oh my God, this is a lot to take on. And then get my composure and move on. And so I was trying to tell them that, yes, even though I'm in charge here and, I'm leadership, but it's okay to be vulnerable and to recognize that you're human, and to reach out for help if it becomes too much for you. So again, it's setting the example, creating some type of culture and environment, to treat them as humans. And again, to celebrate the power that I had women engagement teams able to talk to women in these, at Fort McCoy, because culturally they just wouldn't talk to men. So we celebrated, for one of the first times I've ever seen in my military career, all the men saw the power of what female soldiers could do in terms of taking care of the guests and understanding where they're coming from and address their needs. So
that is such a great story, and I appreciate you sharing that, Erica. Just one question, sort of, if we drill down on that. So when you're talking to them, the younger women, about sort of opening up, it's okay to be vulnerable, let it go. How are they reacting? Are they reacting the same or different than you would expect?
There was really not a lot of reaction. They were just kind of like, okay, because I knew not a lot of them see women in charge either. So not only was it me, but I worked directly for the 1-star, who was a woman. First time I've ever worked for a woman in my military career. So they had these 2 power women saying, it's okay. And they didn't really react, but we let them know, again, that it's okay to be human. And then we brought in chaplains, and we brought in mental health services. So every 3 or 4 days, they would be in the back of the room for them to talk to kind of let out whatever it was. And so again, we created a culture that it wasn't frowned upon to seek help.
So there's a great example of leading from the front with courage. And I know Erica and everyone on this call has done that so many times. And I'd like to pivot to courage, because I think, it takes a lot of self-awareness, a lot of trust in yourself and trust amongst your teams and others to really be able to step out and do that. And I find in my own career that sometimes I was alone. Sometimes I was alone, all alone in that culture. The guys, and I think about this 15 years ago in financial services and in mortgage, a lot of men ran the show. It is a little bit different today. It is changing today. But back then it was, if a woman came in, and this is a true example of me, with good ideas, other ideas, want to change the culture, want to add human resources to the company, other things that just weren't necessarily done at the time. How did you do that? And how did you feel about that? I mean, I will tell you that there were moments where I sat in my office alone and said, okay, I'm not sure what the outcome will be if I do this, but in my heart, I have to. It's the right thing to do. And it is my responsibility to the organization as a whole to do this. So, I stepped out, and sometimes that really came back to bite, but heading it head on, courageous leadership to change. So I'd love to hear some stories around courage and what you experienced and what you've been able to teach others about that.
I'll jump in real quick with that. Courage. Rebecca, going in and starting the 1,500 white tents to anyone who had a loan mod or a short sale approved during the time of the financial crisis. You're listening to the woman who did it. Taking that on by the horn and going around and making sure that got done. You took it upon yourself, excuse me, at your own career expense, at your own, philosophies of making sure that this was the right thing to do at the full expense. And you can read again that. And that to me is the biggest courage of sacrificing your own job, career, everything you have to put on the line to do the right thing. And here you are, 10 years, 12 years later in that cycle. And to go through what you've been through is one of the biggest courages and the most documented courages that had gone through the crisis. And to talk about that without leading with it is unbelievable. At the same time, I think that, the power is our experiences are defining what we're able to change in the future that's going down the pipeline, right? And you think of every one of us have this strength of bringing this incredible courage to take it to the next level. And I'd like to amplify real quick, excuse me, on what Erica was talking about, to pivot back. You made a comment about your son saying that your voice deepens when you talk to someone. I had never seen Erica in a military uniform. I flew up and attended her when she became Lieutenant Colonel, and a two-star general had come out, excuse me, from the Pentagon and everything else. And her demeanor of how she spoke and how she stood and the intensity of her body and her arms, and how I was like, oh my gosh. I mean, she was a whole different person. And to think about going from an enlisted to an officer as a woman, in, out, and how she could flip on a switch. And me noticed that quickly, her demeanor and her whole posture and conversation was just, whoa. And I was like, okay, she's not Erica that she is, oh my gosh, this pedestal. And I believe that we all have done that in some capacity. And so to Rebecca, your point, and to Teresa, to your scale, and Tammy, your picture that you just post, a couple of days ago, showing the Tammy 20 years ago and the Tammy now. I was like, oh my gosh, that you just put out there of your turn with Exit Realty. It really shows our courage to be who we are because of our experiences of what you talk about to grow. And yet we look at ourselves and go, yeah, we're this, but you have no idea that journey that has taken us to that power. And that's where I think that our wins, our small wins, our big wins, and the tribe that we always talk about, and how we can keep that strength to grow, is that power of life. And I know I went full circle, but I just had to pull it together. I mean, that's what I do all the time. So, sorry about that. But that's why I think the authenticity, the ownership, and the courage is really what defines the leader, and the leaders that need to go through our next 10 years or even 5 years of what we're dealing with.
I love that. I'm a martial artist, and one of the things that we say in martial arts is be a lion in uniform and be a lamb when out of uniform. And I think that obviously speaks huge to Erica being in uniform and being in the military. But I think for us as leaders, there's times when you really have to be a lion and command respect, and you have a job that you need to get done and you have to put yourself forward. But I think when you're not in the middle of that, when you can show your human side too, I think that's what helps people to have trust and to see that there's potential for them to become something more, or their opportunities for growth, because they see that you are really a real person also. But when push comes to shove and you've got to get something done, you go in and you absolutely get something done. And every single time that you give yourself those 30 seconds of courage, you're not the same afterwards. It changes you every single time, and you develop more and more character, and you realize that, yeah, we have all been through the unknown before, and we've certainly been through a tremendous amount of unknown over the last couple of years, but we've been through the unknown before and we're still here. So the mindset is so strong on getting through it as opposed to staying still and being fearful about it.
Yeah, that's so helpful. I would love to hear, Teresa, Erica, your point of view around courage, because I know we've all have our stories around courage. And Tammy, I love the fact that it's sort of ever evolving. I hadn't really put my finger on that before, but you are a different person every time you go through that. And recognizing that different person, I think is really powerful. So thank you for that.
I think too, and I think I love everything that I've heard and has been said. I think courage is sometimes also realizing that other people may know you better than you know yourself, right? So does that make sense? And owning up that courage. And I want to bring up one book that was sent to me, and when I got it, I was really surprised about why I got this book. Like, why the heck is somebody sending me this book? And it's a really good friend of mine, right? Y'all know Ryan Wayant with the LGBTQ plus Real Estate Alliance. He sent me this book and he had it signed by the author, and it's called Quit Being So Good. I thought, what the heck is he saying? I'm trying to be a goodie. I could not figure out why he sent me this book. And I know we were going to talk about books, so I just have to, because I'm not a big book reader, but I had to read this book because somebody sent it to me and it's a personal friend. And it's stories of a smart, nice girl, crossed out, an unapologetic woman by Christy Hemmer. And I thought, wait, what the? So the wonderful thing about it is it's about 18 women that write stories, including Gloria Steinem. I mean, some of the best known women about times when people said you're too good at this, or don't be as smart as that, or guys won't like you, or all these things that constantly we need courage to be able to face our own weakness, our own strengths that we don't want to own up to. So sometimes that courage is that. And so this book that Ryan sent me really was a life changer for me, because it was like, you're good and you're good at what you do. So, don't ever apologize for that. I mean, it was like, I don't know, it was for me a very insightful gift that just opened up. So it's kind of opened up my eyes to books, because I never read books. So I love the whole thing. So anyway, I think courage to really sometimes realize that is really what I kind of wanted the message to be.
That is terrific. And while we're on books, I'd like to share one too that was a little bit, people tend to go to sort of the academic books of leadership and how to be a leader and I just found this book. It's called The Boys in the Boat. And The Boys in the Boat is by Daniel James Brown. And it's a story about an unlikely poor boy growing up in Seattle. And essentially, I'm not going to do spoilers for you, but it's his journey through time and through events and through hardships. I mean, true hardships, where at the end winning a gold medal in rowing at the Olympics. And it's unlikely. The whole story is unlikely, but it's true. So I just loved it. And I got so much out of it, because you have to sort of divorce yourself from things that you think are not possible, right? You look at this and you can really sort of translate and understand true character and true courage. So I again, it's The Boys in the Boat by Daniel James Brown that I just got a lot out of it, and I recommend it to lots of people to read. But are there other books that people have read that have really moved them around this being authentic and being courageous?
I have a book. It's called Partnering, and it's partnering and forge the deep connections that make great things happen. And it actually starts with the elders of Nelson Mandela and his wife, and these people that are literally changing the world, changing their country's belief systems around prejudice, truly making a difference in, country to country, continent to continent. But the whole idea of partnering is kind of like this group, right? Find your tribe, find those people that bring the most and the best out of you, that make you want to be a better person. That's where you'll keep finding more and more of your strengths. And I loved it for those reasons. It just shows you that building those bonds and those connections and those relationships. And I'm not talking about the networking relationships that maybe that helps you to do a little more business, but those people that make you really want to be tied to a cause that's larger than you. It's bigger than us. What we're doing here is larger than us. And it's so much more important. And so it just really helps you to trigger some great thoughts to really pull a little more courage and more of wanting to be more out of yourself.
Awesome. Thank you, Tammy and Teresa. I've already written those 2 books down. I'm going to grab them. Erica and Desiree, how about your book sharing?
Well, I can just, I just like to speak on courage itself. I think courage is, all of us have done this, is the confidence or stupidity or whatever you want to call it to buck the system, to walk into the room and to have done your homework and to know that, hey, I belong here and I see inequities, I see injustice, or I see something that simply is just broken. And to be part of that solution, and, in the military, we wear our rank on our collar, right? So it can be very intimidating when you're walking in with nothing but stars and you're like, hey, I'm coming to you from whatever. And the bottom line is they're either going to say yes or no. So how do you convince them that what you're saying is important? So the more we go through life, the more confident we get, while hopefully still remaining humble. It's the courage to, as you were saying at the beginning of this, to just do what's right. And unfortunately, the majority of the population just scuttle through life, just settle, don't want to kind of rattle anything, and nothing will get done that way. So, it does take a certain kind of person, which all of us are, to have that courage and that strength to sometimes change things or speak for others that, don't have a voice, to try in our own way to make this world a better place.
Amazing. Thank you, Erica. Desiree?
I'm going to take Erica's lead with the books. I don't have one, but there are so many books that Know Yourself. I actually Googled it before I got on the call, and there's hundreds of it. And there's one that I found by Barbara Rose. She's only got 33 books out there, bestsellers. And she actually has a book called Know Yourself. But instead of highlighting her, I was asked 30 years plus ago to actually write my own book. And the more I think about it, the more I'm evolving that book, that I am going to be writing to know myself, because I have found out that courage that Erica was just talking, all of us have been talking. If I would have ever thought that I'd be working the space I'm working in and what I'm doing, I never would have even championed. I mean, Rebecca, you're the one that said, Desiree, do this, I'll be there behind you and make this happen. And through thick and thin, it's still going on stronger and greater and bigger. And we're taking on some serious movements. I mean, Erica's taken on, the refugees resettlement, what's going on. I mean, the biggest crisis that's ever going to happen in the humanity of life. Whoever would have thought of the stuff that's going on and all the logistics that go through it. And unfortunately, a lot of the other NDILC beyond the call. But that core of what we're talking about is where I feel that book that's evolving, we need to put it out there and show what's in our mind, and not just a snapshot, the snippet that we're talking about right now. How are we thinking through that process? And we're always learning from each other. We're always being able to scale what our our missions in life and what we can do to make the life better. Like Erica said, we all have it within us, but who's actually going to take the leap of faith and have that courage to expose ourselves and strengthen? And so for me, I want to say I'm a work in progress of the book that I'm going to be creating, because instead of just doing a magazine for 11 years, why not curate why I do what I do to make sure that we all can scale quicker, faster, and not of me, but of each one of you experts. My job is to curate the thought, to bring it together, and that way we can be the strength to go with it, because we're in a humanitarian race, a climate race of keeping our quality of life to grow our quality of life and keep it maintained. And if we don't look at each other to help embrace our own storytelling, our own books, then our life is not going to be the best it could be, in my opinion, because we're fractionalized. And that being said, I'm going to say the book of Know Yourself is one you're looking at that's being made in progress. And I believe all of us are going to be that way, and we'll be able and should do that.
Now, I appreciate that. And I just we just have a few minutes left here today. And, the purpose here really is to lead by example, to share and learn, and continually commit ourselves to leadership and changes and authenticity. And I hear it throughout all the themes, not only on this call, but every call. I feel like I learn something new from this group. It's exciting. It's daunting. I feel like I'm honored to be a part of this group. So with that said, I'll just open it up to any last few words of help and support for others out there who are looking to make that big change or continue on their journey of authenticity and know yourself.
I'll start. So, there's that old phrase, get a seat at the table, right? Find a way, whatever that looks like. Ask someone how they got there. What was their path? Don't always settle for the sidelines. Don't let people tell you no. Find a way to get your voice, and especially if you're representing other voices, heard in a very monolithic type of environment. And at first, they may be a little intimidated by having you there, but usually in the end, they appreciate it. Like most of us, it takes a little while for our male counterparts to sometimes trust us, and then they see the value that you add, and then they just look at you as a team member. But unfortunately, that isn't a given. That takes women a little longer to establish that credibility.
Great, thanks, Erica. Others?
I'm going to also concur with Erica. I think that's so true. And, sometimes you are intimidated yourself to jump into a situation because you didn't get invited. For example, let's say you were with a group of guys, and this happened to me when I was the NARA incoming president, because at the time, most of the NARA guys, it was guys that were the presidents, Gary Costa, it was Jason Mariello, Juan Martinez, this whole group. And I was the incoming president, and we've only had 7, now 8 women that have led NARA. And so, we were going to an event, and they said, okay, well, let's all go, but they didn't invite me. And so I was like hurt, right? I didn't know what to do. And I remember I asked Jason Mariello, who's Colombian, a good friend of mine, Jason, what do I do? And I said, I feel like I get left out. I don't know what. He goes, heck, I get left out all the time. I just invite myself. So you just need to invite yourself and just come with me. Just grab my arm. It was so, just invite yourself. And so from that moment on, if they don't invite me, I'm like, well, I want to go with you guys. Like, wait a minute, I'm part of this team too. And so even if it's going out in the smoking cigars, I don't smoke cigars, but I'm going to hang in there with you. So it was just do that, because that gets you noticed. Now you're part of that, and you can be part of whatever your group. Sometimes you just have to invite yourself. A great quote that I love is birds that don't open their mouths don't get fed.
Awesome. Love it.
Closed mouths don't get fed, right?
I love that, Teresa, because you actually just gained huge respect from them too by jumping in and saying that, because they could totally ignore it and let it slide and even just assume, but you had the courage to jump in and say that. I say this often, but if you know what you want and why you want it, the key biggest thing of knowing that you're in the right lane, of knowing yourself, is how bad do you want it? You're in your lane and you're in your zone if you want it really badly. I believe in it so strongly. I have a tattoo on my back that says, be true to yourself and you'll be able to lead others. Everyone was put here for a purpose, and the closer we get to that purpose, and that doesn't mean that what we do for a living might be that whole purpose. It might be the things we can do because of what it is we do for a living, or some spin-offs from that. But I think know what you want, why you want it, and how bad you want it, and you'll definitely be evolving into the lane you were put here for.
Great. Love that, Tammy. Thank you so much for sharing that, and all of you. Desiree, I'm going to ask you to sort of give your comments on this too, if you wouldn't mind, share that with us. And then if you could close us out, that would be great.
Absolutely. That was exactly perfect down the line. So thank you very much, Rebecca, for hosting this. This has been incredible. And the change and what's going on in your career, yes. Anyway, so, speak out. That's the whole thing. Courage. I mean, we're all talking about something. So speak out no matter where you go, ask questions, stand up in front of the audience, get on stage, make sure you have a voice. And so next month, for the month of April, it's going to be, or actually May, is going to be Speak Out. I will be hosting that. It's called Unconscious Bias is Present, but Ignoring Only Perpetuate. Take a stand and speak out. So that's exactly what courage is about, is speaking out, standing up, and taking a stance. So that being said, I want to thank everyone and for your incredible time, honor, and commitment to the council, to the commitment to the industry that you're doing and the work we're doing all together. And everyone, please be safe and stay healthy. And thank you all. And remember, as my son would say, every day that we can smile is a day with incredible living. So the idea is that having that great strength, and look at the smiles that everyone has. I just absolutely love it. So thank you all, and make sure you follow NDILC, the NDILC Council, and the magazine that's out, these incredible articles. Rebecca, Tammy, and everyone else has contributed articles, and Teresa is going to be our next Chief Centerfold for Collaboration Breeds Success. So have a great one, and thank you for a beautiful day. All right, bye-bye.
Thank you.